the U.S. government is engaged in a large number of secret medical experiments.
Politicians, by the CIA, by every federal agency involved in the drug war.
In the United States, prisoners in federal institutions and even people in the public were given drugs without their awareness or consent and experimented upon.
Few organizations in the world carry a reputation as complex and controversial as the Central Intelligence Agency. The CIA's official mission is to protect the United States from threats, both foreign and domestic. But as we've delved deeper into history, it's become increasingly clear that the agency's actions haven't always lived up to these noble goals. In a previous video, we uncovered some of the darkest secrets of the CIA. Today, we're taking it even further, into the realm of the sinister and downright bizarre. But before we dive in, don't forget to support the channel by liking and subscribing. Your support helps us bring more hidden truths to light, a step beyond mind control and manipulation. At times, the activities of the CIA were not just terrifying, they were outright strange. By the 1960s, gripped by Cold War paranoia, the CIA had convinced itself that the Soviets had mastered the use of paranormal abilities for intelligence gathering. The agency feared that the United States was vulnerable to these new techniques, so they launched a full-scale investigation into what many might consider the stuff of science fiction. Project Scanit and Gondola Wish. The CIA began funding research into psychokinesis, out-of-body experiences, and remote viewing, believing that people could move objects with their minds, leave their bodies to explore distant locations, and see things beyond the reach of physical senses. Imagine the shock when early experiments reported a 65% accuracy rate. These results were compelling enough that by 1977, the CIA created a full-fledged program called Gondola Wish. This wasn't just some side project. This was a serious operation designed to turn psychic powers into weapons of war. But were they chasing ghosts? The agency was not alone in its pursuit of these paranormal phenomena. Similar projects were undertaken by the Soviets, who were reportedly just as convinced of the potential of parapsychology. The Cold War was a time of intense rivalry, where even the most outlandish ideas were explored if there was any chance they could offer an advantage. In one particularly famous case, psychic Uri Geller was tested by the CIA and other agencies. Geller claimed to have psychic abilities, including telepathy and psychokinesis. During these tests, Geller was reportedly able to perform feats that the researchers found difficult to explain, such as accurately replicating drawings made in another room. Although Geller's abilities were later widely debunked, his involvement highlighted the lengths to which the CIA was willing to go in its search for new forms of intelligence gathering. The broader context: Cold War paranoia. The Cold War context cannot be understated when discussing these projects. The rivalry between the United States and the Soviet Union was not only about nuclear arsenals and military might, but also about technological and psychological superiority. Both sides were desperate to find any edge, no matter how unconventional. The space race, the arms race, and the intelligence race all played out against a backdrop of fear and mistrust, leading to the pursuit of increasingly bizarre and unethical research. The failures and the legacy. Over time, it became clear that the research into paranormal abilities was largely fruitless. Most of the experiments failed, and what seemed like success was probably just luck. Yet, Gondola Wish was eventually absorbed into a wider military project called Stargate. Millions of dollars later, the project was quietly suspended and declassified in 1995, leaving behind more questions than answers. But was it really all for nothing? Some believe the agency might have discovered more than they've let on. The legacy of these projects raises important questions about the ethics of intelligence operations and the extent to which the government will go to achieve its aims. Even today, the idea of using psychological warfare and mind control remains a deeply unsettling possibility, one that continues to capture the imagination of conspiracy theorists and skeptics alike. The CIA's shadowy role in global drug trafficking. Shifting from mind games to mind-altering substances, the CIA has long been accused of involvement in global drug trafficking. This is no fringe conspiracy. The allegations date back to the Korean War, where the CIA was accused of forming alliances with drug smugglers to combat communism. But the most explosive case came in 1996, when journalist Gary Webb dropped a bombshell. The CIA had a hand in fueling the crack cocaine epidemic that devastated American cities in the 1980s. The Contras and the cocaine pipeline. To understand Webb's claims, we need to travel back to Nicaragua in 1979. A Marxist revolution led to the rise of the Contras, anti-communist rebel groups that received support from the Reagan administration. But U.S. government funding only covered a fraction of the Contras' needs. So where did the rest of the money come from? According to Webb, it was crack cocaine. The CIA allegedly turned a blind eye, or worse, actively protected drug traffickers who were funding the Contras' war effort. This was no small-scale operation. It was a flood of drugs into American cities that led to thousands of deaths and the destruction of entire communities. The publication and fallout. When Gary Webb's investigation was published,
My name's Gary Webb. I am an investigative journalist. I've been an investigative journalist for about 25 years for daily newspapers. And in 1996, I wrote a series of stories entitled Dark Alliance, which was about CIA involvement in drug trafficking.
it sparked a firestorm of controversy. His series, titled Dark Alliance, detailed how the crack cocaine that swept through African-American neighborhoods in the 1980s could be traced back to the CIA's efforts to support the Contras in Nicaragua. The mainstream media quickly leaped to the defense of the CIA, dismissing Webb's work as the rantings of a conspiracy theorist. But in the affected communities, Webb's findings resonated deeply, confirming long-held suspicions that the government had a role in their suffering. The impact on African-American communities. The crack epidemic had a devastating impact on African-American communities. Not only did the drugs lead to a surge in addiction and death, but the harsh drug laws that followed resulted in mass incarceration, disproportionately targeting African-American men. The war on drugs, which escalated in the 1980s, was seen by many as a war on black communities, and Webb's revelations only added fuel to the fire. The CIA's denials and the ongoing debate. The CIA, of course, denied any direct involvement in drug trafficking.
General idea of the CIA dealing drugs was something that the American mainstream press had never written about before, and that's why it prompted outrage.
An internal CIA report claimed there was no evidence that any CIA employee or asset had a direct role in the drug trade, and a later House of Representatives committee report reached a similar conclusion. But for many, the denials rang hollow. Webb's career was effectively destroyed by the backlash, and he was forced out of journalism. In 2004, Webb was found dead in his home, with 2 gunshot wounds to the head. His death was ruled a suicide, a conclusion that many found suspicious. The secret war in Laos and the Golden Triangle. Accusations of the CIA's involvement in drug trafficking didn't end with Nicaragua. Similar allegations resurfaced in the context of the so-called secret war in Laos. During the Vietnam War, Laos became a crucial battleground in the broader conflict between the US and communist forces. The CIA played a central role in this conflict, training and arming tens of thousands of anti-communist fighters, primarily from the Hmong ethnic group, to combat the North Vietnamese and their allies. The Golden Triangle, a region encompassing parts of Laos, Thailand, and Myanmar, was one of the world's largest producers of opium. Many of the anti-communist groups supported by the CIA were deeply involved in the drug trade, using the profits from opium sales to fund their operations. According to allegations, the CIA not only turned a blind eye to this trade, but actively participated in it, using Air America, a known CIA front organization, to transport drugs throughout Southeast Asia. Journalist Alfred McCoy, who has written extensively on the subject, claims that the CIA provided arms, transport, and protection to the drug lords of the Golden Triangle in exchange for their continued support against communist forces. These allegations have never been fully substantiated, but they raise troubling questions about the lengths to which the CIA was willing to go to achieve its objectives. Operation Popeye, weaponizing the weather. But just when you think the story couldn't get stranger, it does. Imagine using the weather as a weapon. That's exactly what the CIA and US Air Force attempted with Operation Popeye, a weather modification project during the Vietnam War. Through a technique called cloud seeding, the US government believed they could induce rainfall by dispersing chemicals from aircraft. The goal? To turn the monsoon season into a weapon. The science of cloud seeding. Cloud seeding involves dispersing substances like silver iodide or lead iodide into the atmosphere to encourage the formation of rain clouds. The technique had been explored for years, with varying degrees of success, before being adopted for military purposes. In the context of the Vietnam War, the idea was to increase rainfall in specific areas to disrupt enemy supply lines, flood roads, and make life more difficult for the Viet Cong. The execution of Operation Popeye. From 1967 to 1972, the CIA and US Air Force conducted over 2,600 cloud seeding missions across Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia. The operation had 4 primary objectives: to soften road surfaces, cause landslides that would block roads, wash out river crossings, and maintain saturated soil conditions, making travel, agriculture, and other daily activities more difficult for the enemy. However, the technology was unpredictable and often temperamental. It was difficult to determine whether the rain that followed was a direct result of the cloud seeding or merely coincidental. On one occasion, a CIA source reported that cloud seeding accidentally caused 7 inches of rain to fall in just 2 hours on their own Special Forces camp. The fallout and investigation. When Operation Popeye came to light in 1974, the revelation sparked fears of a new arms race and led to a congressional investigation. There was widespread concern that using weather modification as a weapon could trigger a new kind of warfare with potentially devastating consequences. The CIA defended itself by claiming that the operation had been largely ineffective, estimating that only 5% of the rainfall in the operation areas could be attributed to cloud seeding. They characterized the results as limited and unverifiable. The legacy of Operation Popeye. Despite the CIA's claims, many questioned why the agency and the US Air Force would invest tens of millions of dollars over several years in a project they claimed didn't work. To this day, some believe that Operation Popeye was far more effective than the US government was willing to admit. There are even suspicions that the devastating floods that struck North Vietnam in 1971, killing around 100,000 people, were partially caused by the CIA's weather modification efforts.
National authorities said between Friday and Sunday, some 60 centimeters up to 23 inches of heavy rain fell in the central region. Floodwaters spilled over at the main dam at the Ho Ho hydroelectric plant Sunday and destroyed one of its 2 turbines, though officials said the water level was down 5 meters below the top Monday. Throughout the area, several people were killed and several more reported missing.
If true, these deaths would represent only a fraction of the toll that the CIA's interventions contributed to in Southeast Asia during the Vietnam War. The lie that led to war, the Gulf of Tonkin incident. As many people know, the U.S. justified its entry into the Vietnam War based on 2 alleged attacks by North Vietnamese ships on U.S. patrols in the Gulf of Tonkin. These incidents were presented to the American public as acts of unprovoked aggression, leading to Congress passing the Gulf of Tonkin Resolution, which granted President Lyndon B. Johnson broad authority to escalate U.S. military involvement in Vietnam. The truth behind the Gulf of Tonkin. However, in 2005, newly declassified documents revealed a stunning truth. The second attack never happened. The CIA, NSA, and U.S. leadership knew this, but instead of coming clean, they buried the truth to push the country into war.
Today, American jets from Thailand and from carriers in the Gulf of Tonkin continued to fly a heavy schedule of missions against the North Vietnamese and Pathet Lao.
The false narrative of the Gulf of Tonkin incident was a critical factor in leading to the full-scale U.S. intervention in Vietnam. This deception resulted in a conflict that would claim the lives of over 58,000 Americans and millions of Vietnamese. The CIA's role in the deception. The CIA's involvement in the Gulf of Tonkin incident highlights the agency's willingness to manipulate information and deceive the public to achieve its goals. By promoting a false narrative, the CIA played a crucial role in steering the United States into one of the most controversial wars in its history. The rivers of blood spilled in Vietnam can be traced back to this lie, with the CIA playing a key role in the deception. Operation Phoenix, a campaign of terror. The CIA's involvement in Vietnam didn't stop with the Gulf of Tonkin. One of its most notorious operations was Operation Phoenix, a campaign designed to crush the Viet Cong through sabotage, terrorism, and assassination. Launched in 1967, Phoenix was a coordinated effort that relied heavily on intelligence and the use of local forces trained by the CIA. The dark strategies of Operation Phoenix. One of the CIA's tactics under Operation Phoenix was to establish Revolutionary Development Cadres, RDs, to spread anti-communist propaganda and engage in guerrilla warfare. But the RDs were largely ineffective, often fleeing at the first sign of resistance. Far more effective were the Provincial Reconnaissance Units, PRUs, special teams of South Vietnamese soldiers trained and equipped by the CIA. These units operated deep in Viet Cong territory, conducting assassinations, sabotage, and capturing high-value targets. The PRU's effectiveness, however, came with a grim reputation. They became known for their brutality, with numerous reports alleging that they regularly killed civilians during their operations. Some sources claimed that if a PRU was tasked with eliminating a Viet Cong informant, they might kill the entire family to ensure the job was done. The torture tactics of Operation Phoenix. But it didn't end with the killings. Torture became a standard tool in the CIA's arsenal during Operation Phoenix. Beatings, starvation, rape, and electrical torture were all reportedly used on detainees. In one particularly gruesome case, PRU members allegedly inserted a 6-inch dowel into a detainee's ear, penetrating the brain until death. Although the CIA may not have carried out all of this torture directly, they were certainly aware of it, and their continued support for these groups amounted to an endorsement of these brutal methods. The expansion and controversy. Eventually, the scale of Operation Phoenix became too much for the CIA to manage alone, and the Military Assistance Command, Vietnam Studies and Observations Group, MACFSOG, took over much of the work. Yet, the CIA remained deeply involved, especially in intelligence gathering. The agency claimed that nearly 82,000 targets were neutralized, with over 26,000 killed. But how many of these were actual Viet Cong, and how many were innocent civilians caught in the crossfire? We may never know. The revelations about Operation Phoenix sparked widespread outrage and condemnation, both in the United States and internationally. The operation became emblematic of the darker side of U.S. involvement in Vietnam, raising serious ethical and moral questions about the methods used to combat communism. The legacy of Operation Phoenix continues to haunt discussions about the Vietnam War, serving as a stark reminder of the human cost of unconventional warfare and the consequences of secretive and unaccountable military operations. No accountability, no consequences. Despite the horrific actions carried out during Operation Phoenix and the other activities we've discussed, no one within the CIA has faced consequences. Instead, it's people like Gary Webb who dared to expose these truths, who end up paying the price, often with their lives.
And this, I believe, was a very careful strategy, because nobody was going to believe the government if they came out and said we didn't do it. The proof was fairly overwhelming, since we had all these government documents showing that it had happened.
For every secret that's declassified, how many more are hidden away, never to be revealed? With no accountability, we're left to wonder, did anyone learn anything from these dark chapters of history? Looking ahead, what will we discover next? As we continue to uncover these secrets, one can't help but ask, what new revelations will come to light in the next 30 years? Will future generations uncover even more shocking truths about the actions of the CIA and other intelligence agencies? And will we be around to find out? Or will these truths be buried just as deeply as those we've uncovered today? In a world where the truth is often obscured by layers of secrecy and deception, it's more important than ever to remain vigilant. If you found this video enlightening, please like and subscribe. We'll keep digging up the secrets they don't want you to know, so stay tuned and stay vigilant.